Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the Stash Report from the Stash Project. Today is October 8th, 2018, and we have a little show for you here. A few releases that have petered out over the week from overseas, as well as one American release that was actually from the end of September, from round 2 that has come out. Yeah, that's pretty much going to be our show today. So I want to lead off with a correction or addendum. Some people might see it as an apology, whatever floats your goat. In regards to the upcoming Monte Carlo kit from Salvino JR. We had commented rather vociferously in regards to the 3D CAD image that they'd shown a few weeks ago, in terms of the fact that the CAD image showed a incorrect front bumper for the kit itself. Not saying that they released this because of that, because in the time scale of when this image was released, I don't think that anybody could have actually even had a chance to see the video at that time. But being that no matter what you may think of the show or me personally in regards to how I feel about domestic kit manufacturers and their foibles and follies, we do try to present you guys the most accurate information possible when it comes to these things. And so in that case, when further information comes to light that ends up disputing or proving me completely and totally incorrect, then that's fine. We'll go ahead and give you guys that information, because simply put, I don't have anything out against anybody. I just try to give you guys my opinion based on the information we have at the time. So this a CAD image was shown here. This is going to be like one of the parts runners, obviously, for the new kit. And what you'll notice about this is the fact that, in addition to the fact that I actually showed before that there is a separate bumper for the 1974 front end on a separate one of these sort of CAD Runner images that I completely totally forgot about, and so did everybody else apparently, except myself when I went back to read a forum subject, which made me oh geez, what have I done here type of deals. This also shows you that there are separate sort of a front fascia or a front filler panel, if you want to call it that, for each of the different front ends. Also a separate rear bumper or rear filler panel for the butt end, if you will, of the car. Also on this this sprue, just some stuff that is just sort of, I want to cover real quick, because it's obviously there's a whole lot of parts here. This is something that they were talking about developing right after the Oldsmobile kit was released, sort of a generic chassis modification type of thing, where there are several spindles for the front end that will allow you to adjust the ride height for the various kits. Well, actually not for the various kits, for their chassis. Remember that they are, whether you like it or not, using that sort of universal chassis platform underneath their kits. Obviously it makes sense from their aspect. From a tooling thing, they tool up one chassis and you expand or contract it as necessary in order to make it fit the subject matter that you're putting it under. I personally am not a huge fan of it. I understand it, not a fan of it. And so this was something else that they were doing, sort of to add pieces, not so much just to add pieces, but to allow that universal chassis to go under other kits that they may do in the future, or under anything that you would want to put it under. So you have a set of wheel backs that are sort of a drum brake engraving, a set of wheel backs that are disc brake engraving. There are, again, several front end spindles to adjust the ride height, and all those little things that they're on the bottom left or right hand corner, rather, that look like polycaps are wheel spacers, which are of various depths. It's obviously hard to tell the width of something in a two-dimensional 3D image like this. I know that's redundant, but what I mean. You obviously can't see this thing on a three-dimensional axis. But those are going to be wheel spacers again, so you can adjust the track width of the car, and that'll allow them basically to include this, the back half of this parts runner, without obviously the Monte Carlo parts attached to it, to in every kit that they do if they want to, so that universal chassis, again, you can adjust the ride height, you can adjust the track width so that you can push the wheels out or suck them in, depending on what you need to do in order to get them to fit underneath pretty much any body that they would tool up. I will say that, all things aside with what I think about their kits and the way they approach them and their public relations and all the rest of that nonsense, I think it's a nifty bit of engineering on their part. Now, whether or not you would actually ever take that universal chassis and use it underneath anything else, I'm dubious of. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of people who do just wacky, creative, off-the-wall custom work that they could find a use for the chassis. But the actual ability to put disc brakes on the front, drum brakes on the back, to adjust the track width, to adjust the ride height, without having to do surgery to the model itself, that you have to do with so many Revell kits, for example, where things are four-wheel drive stands. That goes for everything. Well, we just talked about in the video about the All Japan Model and Hobby Show. Those MG kits that are getting reissued, those have a great big four-wheel drive stance to them as well. That is not realistic to the car. So it's not just something that is solely a problem of the U.S. companies. But, it's a nifty, like I said, nifty bit of engineering, and I think goes a long way, just generally speaking, to, if nothing else, sort of, make their product a little more, I don't know if desirable is necessarily the word, but it certainly makes their product a little easier to work with. Certainly, in the terms of hopefully all of those parts really fitting everything, and they should, because again, it's a universal chassis. Other parts that are on that runner are, of course, the replacement rear end and suspension pieces for the Oldsmobile kit to fix the incorrect leaf spring rear axle setup that it had. The one thing that somebody has mentioned to me is the fact that there should be two different hoods in this kit, one for each of the different front end styles. I'm not enough of a Monte Carlo expert, nor do I just particularly care enough to really go and look that up. I'm going to take their word for it. So that obviously we have not seen that runner, and so I'm not going to comment any further on it in regards to that until we see something about that. If you looked at that and said some stuff free floating in space, that obviously is where the injection molds itself will run through and connect parts to one another, but they're just not shown in this image for clarity's sake. But yeah, so there's that. Like I said, I just I don't want anybody to ever say that we withheld information or we intentionally put out incorrect things. I'm not exactly sure why the 3D CAD image that they released to the public had the wrong front bumper on it, but be that as it may, it did, and it's sort of water under the bridge because it's just an incorrect image. And it turns out that the kit itself is not incorrect in that aspect. I'm still not a big fan of the wide open rear end that thing has in terms of where the chassis fits in the back, but maybe that's something else that's fixed and we just don't realize. So anyway, that covers that. Some other things. We have one new kit announcement to discuss real quick. This is something that was done at the hobby show, but I forgot completely about it because I didn't have the image with the other things, and there really isn't any other information about it other than to show you this picture, which is this. It's going to be the next Ebro F1 kit, which I believe is a variation of an existing tooling already. I'm pretty sure that this 49 type Lotus, the Lotus Type 49 has been done in the past. This is going to be the 49C 1970 season version. So for the fans of Lotus F1 cars, they're going to continue on that path, which is not a big surprise. Obviously, they have quite a bit of money tied up in the tooling and licensing for Team Lotus in general. So for F1 fans, there's something to look forward to. When? Haha, good guess. Again, I want to say it's a modified tooling. I probably should have looked that up, but again, you know how I am about F1 cars. They're fantastic for you guys who build them. I don't, and so I don't know enough to base an educated opinion off of them, as it were, other than the fact that the Ebro kits in general are nice. Are held up by or run by one of the former lead designers at Tamiya. So the kits are nice. We have several Ebro kits in general. They're just really sort of bad about making release dates. The one F1 kit that they just released, that F2 rather Honda, I mean, that was 18 months plus since the release date, which was another 6 months after the announcement. So that one's a 2-year journey to get that kit out and done with. So that's sort of the thing you take with a small company. They're going to do things on their own timeline, and there's nothing you can really do to change it, or I guess really argue about it at that point. So let's talk about kit releases. Again, we have one release here from the domestic side of things, and that is the Round 2 kit that was coming out at the end of September from AMT, and that is a reissue of their Plymouth Duster 340, the 1971 kit. Now, this is the new toolkit that AMT did in the mid to late 1990s. It was probably one of the last dozen or, well, half dozen or so kits that they did prior to the sellout to Racing Champions and what will be basically the implosion of the hobby there at the early 2000s point. This kit does come with pad printed tires. That's something, of course, it never had in the past. It does have a completely updated decal sheet, which is something that it needed. In the past, it wasn't exactly the most robust decal sheet because you could sort of see the writing on the walls with a lot of those AMT kits. The kits themselves are not very bad in the terms of accuracy, fit, and everything else that went on with the AMT kits in the mid to late 1990s. However, they weren't the most robust in the way of decals. There's a lot of those kits that the decals were only partially of a scheme and things like that, where you started seeing a lot of the aftermarket decal people like Heath Marks and things like that come into effect because in order to have a certain striping package that didn't come with a kit, AMT was really good about including stripes that would match the box art, but not other colors of the stripes or not complete versions of the of striping packages and things like that. So new decals in there. Otherwise, same kit that you've come to know and love if you are into dusters in general. So, I said it's probably one of the better kits of the 1990s. And it gets this faux vintage box art, which really isn't too bad. I mean, I like the box art in general. It looks good. But, you also know how I feel about the fake vintage thing of kits that aren't old enough to be a vintage kit. So there is that. The rest of the kits we're going to talk about here real quick are all going to be reissues from Hasegawa for the month of October. And they got a couple of kits that we were waiting on. As well as a couple of the 1/24 scale F1 cars, which are just fun in general. So let's talk about the F1 car first. Here you got the reissue of their 1/24 scale Jordan 192. So this, I really need my list to talk about this because I don't know enough about it just off the top of my head. It's going to represent, let me see here, the 1992 F1 season. This kit does require additional decals that are not included, as you'll see here with this picture of the real car. The car itself had a Barkley tobacco livery with it. Those decals are not included in the kit's decals that it comes with. And so right now, I don't believe, I think there may have been, this is where there may have been a set of decals in the past, but as of right now, it's out of production or it's never been done, one of the two, because it's certainly not anything that's available right now prior to this kit being reissued. So, like I said, if you really want to do it, you kind of have to wait. There are two decal options for the Barkley thing. There's either the Barkley wording, like the image of the real car showed, or that stripe that is below the word Barkley is much, much bigger. It's basically the Barkley logo, and that was basically what was run at races in 1992, where tobacco sponsorship was already prohibited. You started seeing a lot of that come into effect, where you see certain versions of the McLaren MP4, somewhere about the 4 or 5 range, where the Marlboro livery would become sort of a barcode for the places where the tobacco liveries were prohibited, and it would be the barcode, of Marlboro, just without the lettering. I'm trying to think of what the Benson's and Hedges was another one where they had a number of different things like Buzzing Hornets and things like that, liveries for places where tobacco liveries were prohibited by law, because this, mid 1990s, right around the time when that stuff started being verboten on cars. So that kit, being of that era, does not have the decals included for it. So I'm sure Shunko or somebody will probably make a supplement if Shunko didn't make one back when this kit was around originally, and we'll just reprint it. We'll let you guys know if we see it pop up. The other 1/24 scale kit is actually an Formula 3000 car. This is the 1989 season Watanabe Dunlop Reynard. This kit does look like it has all of its decals. For this particular car, there were a couple of different liveries on the 89D. because I believe they ran more than one of these chassis, Reynard 89D chassis in Formula 3000 that year. But this appears to be more or less a complete livery set. Both those kits, the Jordan and the Reynard, are full detail within the context of it being sort of a simplified full detail, because a 1/24 scale F1 car is pretty small. Even a 1/20 scale F1 car is smaller than you would think it would be. But it's fun to have those kits back just because they're such an odd scale. Plus, if you really if you kind of really liked F1, but you didn't want to have 1/20th scale because you're one of those people that can't handle two different scales, this is an option for you. Obviously, it's a very confined option. There's only a couple more of these that have not been reissued at this point, but you know, it is what it is. And then on the reissue side, for the stuff that we were waiting on, you have the Team Kitamitsu STP Civic Ferio. So this is the last of the Civic Ferio kits that were done in the mid-1990s as far as the livery options go. This one, of course, looking more of a traditional NASCAR racer than anything else, with the petty blue and fluorescent red STP livery. This car did okay. A couple of, I think it podiumed one time, and I had a couple other near podium finishes, some force and things like that. Just a fun kit to have back, because again, it was the only one that they had not reissued at this point. And then the last reissue that is in this video will be this, which is the Kawasho Corporation AE 101 Corolla 11 JTCC car. Now, this would be a 1992 season vehicle. This team only ran 3 races. It is notable because at the time it had a female co-driver, which was a, you know, off-the-wall thing for JTCC at the time. There really haven't been too many female drivers in JTCC or any Japanese racing series, period. So this was, you know, an oddity, if you will, in that sense. Again, underfunded team, ran the first race of the season, one of the mid-season races, I think the 4th or the 5th round, and then it ran the Intertech race at the end of the year. Not a particularly, you know, strong finishing car. Obviously, it's a low-budget team, and they, you know, did what they could. This car is almost more petty blue in real life than the actual STP car was. It's a much lighter, almost, I think a good match for this would probably be like Tester's French blue, but of course that means using enamel spray paint. So we'll see what we can get for paint on this one in terms of something that matches, that is not going to require us to go back into the past in terms of paint use. I know there's some people out there swear by enamel paints, but I'd pass on that if I can. And then there are 2 decal releases that I want to talk about from Hobby Design. One of which apparently I was going to download a picture of, but I didn't. Oh wait, I just need to refresh my page here. So they released 2 sets of decals for the AMG GT3 kit, the new Tamiya, or well, it's not new at this point, but the Tamiya AMG, the new AMG kit, not the Fujimi one from the 2011 to 2015 season. They are the first commercially available set of decals for this car, which is, of course, the Lincoln Park 2016 24 Hours of Spa car. The one thing about this car, trying to do this livery, has always been, of course, the difficulty of the fact that this car is wrapped in legitimate chrome wrap. It is shiny chrome. It's not just like, ooh, it's shiny silver. Now, obviously, the car is not really chrome. This is all the fact that, you know, in 2016, you can, you know, basically print Mylar, you know, chrome on a Mylar or vinyl wrap like you would anything else. So the decals will include all the red stuff and all of the Lincoln Park logos and everything else you need to make the car. The difficulty you as the builder has is what formula you're going to use to chrome the actual car. I almost think this is one of these situations where the most reasonable solution is actually having the body of the car built up as much as you can and then having it professionally chromed. Because the thing that all chrome finishes, as far as I know, except perhaps one, which is, I have not seen it used or have any experience with it, and it's a very, very, very expensive paint. It's like $150 for a very small amount of it. Your all-clad, your Molotov marker, your, you know, I'm trying to think what the heck the other stuff was called, and I can't remember what it is now. Your spastics, and anything like that, are all very, very fragile finishes. They don't like to take clears. They don't like to obviously be handled, which of course something you're going to have to do a lot of, putting decals on. And with these decals being what they are in terms of the large panels that they are, and in both real life and in the decal sheet, you're going to have to use some sort of setting solution to get them to sit. And chances are, if you break out anything stronger than micro set, you're going to ruin the paint. You're going to ruin the chrome finish of pretty much everything that's just commercially available to us as a paint or an ink or whatever. So it's like I said, it's almost a situation of building the body up, getting as many panels as you can together, and then just setting the rest of it out, attached to the sprues the way you do when you get something commercially chromed, and get the whole body chromed, because that is probably the only thing that will stand up to the micro sol and perhaps solva set that you would need in order to get these decals down. And even then, if you leave the solva set on, because that stuff tends to be, it's the strongest option. It's the nuclear option of decals. You would have to monitor that so you don't eat the chrome back off the body. So it's really, really cool livery. If you're into Linkin Park like I am, if you're a certain generation, that that band is important to your life, if nothing else, and even more so now with the lead singer being passed on. Yes, that just replicating that chrome is going to be kind of interesting. I have one other livery set for a Super GT team that requires parts of the body to be chromed, but they're small enough parts I think I can get away with spraying Molotov refill through my airbrush. That whole body being chrome like that, that's another animal altogether. And then the other set of decals is something that sort of popped up. I mean, we knew they were coming because they were up for pre-order, but it's one of these things where you got to wonder what kind of licensing they have on this. Actually, I wonder what kind of licensing they had on the Linkin Park one, but hobby design being what they are, sometimes they don't really care about licensing. There are the decals to do the 2016 season car for Good Smile Racing. Now, this is the car you assume you would have gotten out of Fujimi had Fujimi actually gone through with their AMG project. People who have watched this channel forever know that at one point in time, the AMG GT3 kit was going to be a Fujimi project. They showed 3D renders of that model at one point during Wonderfest. I think it was in 2015. It was very exciting because at that point, the 2016 AMG GT3, car had been debuted. It was a thing. It wasn't just a concept anymore. And obviously, at that point, Fujimi was making, many, many years of BMW Z4s with changes every year for the Good Smile Racing team. The Good Smile Racing team then changed over to the SLS AMG, and you saw again two kits for the 2015 Super GT season come out. And in 2016, as the decals will show you, Fujimi was still associate sponsoring this team. Now, 2017, they stopped sponsoring this team, and that's when the project either was shifted to Tamiya, or Tamiya decided to do the project themselves after realizing that Fujimi was not going to be able to do it or did not want to do it. So these decals sort of replicate the kit that never was. They are already sold out at Hobby Japan and a couple other places that normally carry this stuff. I don't want to be that guy who goes, oh my God, you need to buy this because it's limited edition. But just because I know how bad, if you will, Japanese copyright laws are in terms of what they will and won't allow, and I know that Good Smile Racing, of course, or Good Smile Company, the sort of toy company, if you will, behind Good Smile Racing, is very, very protective of their thing. That's why they're doing the licensing of the Good Smile Racing 2017 24 Hours of Spa car as their own decals. It'd be very, very interesting to see how long these are allowed to exist. I'm sure that, China doesn't care. China will, you'll probably be able to buy these through, Hong Kong, Hobby Easy, things like that. But I'm not sure how long you'll be able to get them from anywhere, I don't know, say reputable is the right word, but you know what I mean. It's anywhere in Japan, anywhere with that sort of connection where a cease and desist would hold any water. They are a 3-sheet decal. There's sort of a carbon fibery sheet. There are the sheet with the Vocaloid images on it, and then there's sort of all the stripes and the associated sponsorships and the number placards and things like that. So it's not quite as complicated, I want to say, as the Fujimi decals have been on these cars, where a lot more was tied up in each of the decal things. But it's still obviously a very, very intensive decal sheet. The placement guide is sort of does give you the idea of how you're supposed to go about it in terms of what to place first and what order to put things on. But it'll be interesting to see. Hobby Design's decals have always been like decent quality, so I'm not worried about that type of thing. But again, mainly because if you looked at the decal placement sheet and when it was up on the screen, you notice that the Good Smile Racing is in like Chinese characters. It just is blah if you don't know how to read Chinese or you don't know what this car is off the top of your head. Racing 2016. Now we know what it is, and that's fine and dandy. But again, it's one of those. We're not mentioning what this is. Yeah, hint, hint. So, I mean, hey, I'm glad somebody's doing some decals besides Frankie in terms of other subject matters, because, I mean, my love of SK decals, but somebody has to do some other decals. Frankie can't do them all, and so, and I know that, overall, we've talked about this before, Japanese racing, very licensing conscious. It's a reason why you don't see a lot of them done, because you can't get them carried in Japanese stores and things like that. So happy to see somebody take a whack at it. And again, I don't necessarily expect it to be like pulled off the market, but if you find one, yeah, go ahead and grab one just to make sure. So anyway, guys, that wraps up this week's video. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you guys on the other side.